Joey Nelson was on top of the world when the first big loads of cattle arrived at his new Bramer, Missouri feedlot in 2013. The 19-year-old had a government loan and was anxious to grow his operation. Nelson's supplier, Iowa-based Cyclone Cattle Company, was purchasing truckloads of cattle from drought-stricken southern states and sending them to Nelson as well as others. It was only a short time, however, before Nelson was overwhelmed.
They thought that they were going to get rich off of this, and they didn't have a place to go with them. So they just kept sending them here. Everything works until you run out of grass or feed or money, one of the three. Run out of grass first, so you went to feeding more, and then the feed bills get bigger than the bill they want to pay, and then you run out of money.
By then, the young farmer was trying to feed nearly 800 steers and cows as Missouri faced a drought of its own. Nelson's debt grew to nearly $300,000. That's when Nelson made the mistakes that would land him in federal prison. He sold some of his own cattle without notifying FSA, a requirement when livestock is tied to farm loans, and failed to ask the sale barns to list the agency on the checks. Nelson knew he was violating the rules, but moved ahead, hoping to avoid a months-long delay that might follow a request to the federal government.
I figured I had done something wrong by not going through the proper channel to sell the cattle. I mean, you run out of operating money, and if you want to keep the cattle alive, you're going to sell something to feed them to pay the feed bills.
Court documents suggest that Nelson deliberately hid the sales by having checks written out using a different version of his name than is on his FSA loans. Some checks also were made out to a friend, the money later transferred to Nelson's bank account.
I'm not going to say that I didn't sell some of the cattle that were on my loan note, because we did. But we didn't sell them to, go buy a trip to Hawaii or anything like that.
Occasionally, farmers who cheat federal programs or mislead consumers are accused of using the profits for purchases the government would describe as being for personal enjoyment and pleasure. In 2016, for example, an Idaho farmer was sentenced to 3 years in prison for selling regular alfalfa seed as organic. Court documents say he used the profits to buy an RV and a boat. Dr. Michael Roseman, an Iowa-based psychologist, says that more often than not, producers who get in trouble with USDA made decisions that were intended to keep their farm or ranch financially viable.
Often there is a misconception that farmers deliberately undertake fraud, or if they do, only to make money, but that's not the main reason. I think the main reason is that farmers want to get ahead, and they may have made mistakes and they can't bear to own up to them because it is an admission of weakness.
In rare cases, some psychologists believe, those farmers who were charged have committed suicide to either avoid serving time in prison or facing the public shame. Roseman says the data shows a shift away from older producers taking their lives.
Now we're seeing younger farmers from age 45 up to their late 60s as the most vulnerable for self-harm. And we're trying to figure out why that is. Possibly it has something to do with a sense that I only have a few more years to succeed, and it's make or break time.
Before Joey Nelson knew it, he was standing before a federal judge in Kansas City, being sentenced to 2 years in the U.S. penitentiary at Leavenworth, Kansas.
He said when he gave me the 24 months that he was making an example out of me to the agricultural community. And I thought, boy, some example. You guys advertise your loans very hard. And this is what will happen if something goes wrong.
Nelson, now 24, believes FSA loans are not only important, but critical to keeping American farmers in business. He does wonder, however, if young farmers with loans should have a greater degree of oversight and guidance.
I thought, well, at the worst case scenario, I've done something that I broke a rule in a loan. didn't commit a crime. I didn't, go out and rob a bank or anything like that. I mean, I broke a contract. Well, not when it's federal. You've committed some sort of fraud. They said that I'd set out from day one to do this. Well, I can tell you from day one, I didn't know what I was doing.
The parent company of Cyclone Cattle Company, the Iowa feedlot that had been sending Nelson loads of cattle in 2014, filed for bankruptcy in April of 2018. Although he spent 13 months in Leavenworth Camp, a minimum security satellite facility, the time there still convinced Nelson to always dot his I's and cross his T's.
Just imagine being ripped out of everything you've known and thrown into a complete and total different place. You go from working 12 and 13-hour days to sitting around. Your world just comes to a stop. They let you out early if you got a drug case because you got a problem. And, well, I got an addiction too, I guess. Gambling. It's a gambling addiction to playing farming. And, they didn't offer a treatment course for that.
Nelson was released in March of 2018 and is trying to move on with his life. He now farms with his mother, who has had her own operation for decades. Nelson says he has learned some lessons the hard way.
Anybody that's young that wants to get bigger, it's faster is always the better way. Well, not necessarily. It can catch up with you.
For Market to Market, I'm Colleen Bradford Krantz.